Hello and good day, my fellow travelers and backpackerinas. Welcome to another episode of On the Road at the Speed of Mike. In the last episode, I was heading through Alabama, and before I made it all the way through the state, I went into Florida, and the very tip of the panhandle into Pensacola. So we're going to check that out right now. Sitting on the very tip of the Florida Panhandle sits Pensacola. Named after the Indian tribe of the same name, the port of Pensacola was first discovered by the Spanish in the mid-1500s, but a series of disastrous storms dissuaded colonization until the 1700s. Being the deepest port in the Gulf, Pensacola became an important point of control and trade, eventually trading hands from the Spanish, French, British, back to the Spanish and finally to the Americans after the War of 1812. Thanks to one of those statue guys we saw earlier in Raleigh, Andrew Jackson. Its very history, it sits on the edge of Creole and Cajun country that's more prominent to the west. Today, Pensacola is known for its neighboring beaches more than anything, but its downtown is actually pretty decent for a city on the smaller side as it is. While it doesn't have too much in the realm of historic buildings, it still seems fairly well kept and has enough of a mix from local colleges, military bases, and tourists to keep it vibrant. Speaking of military bases, Pensacola is also home to the Blue Angels. Really, for me, the beaches were the biggest draw. Heading southbound over Pensacola Bay is the bridge to the Gulf Breeze, followed by another bridge that takes you to Pensacola Beach. This long-spanning barrier island features a small portion dedicated to tourist infrastructure and beach homes, but the vast majority is natural duneland and white sandy beaches, and it's all part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, which is part of the national park system. At least in the off-season, it's easy to find a secluded spot, and it's still nice enough weather-wise to savor in contrast to the colder northeast from whence I came. It's also apparent why this portion of the state is part of Florida instead of Alabama. Normally looking at a map, you'd think Alabama would just continue down rather than have this big chunk of Florida Panhandle sticking into it, but if you go much further west from this point, the water starts turning to the murky Mississippi runoff color versus the refreshingly pristine turquoise and blues Florida beaches are known for. Driving down to the western tip of Pensacola takes you to Fort Pickens, which is also part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. Like so many other stops in the south, this location is yet again best known for its part in the Civil War. I had no idea this place existed, let alone that it was one of only 3 locations, all of which are in Florida, that the Union side managed to hold during the entirety of the war. The South was never able to capture these places. It's a pentagonal brick structure and was the strongest fort in the region, which is one of the reasons efforts were made early on to reinforce and hold it while abandoning outlying strong points. Today the fort's in ruins. There was a massive explosion at one point that destroyed the entirety of one corner wall section of it, and another section was just completely covered with what was at the time a modern design and modern weapons. There's several tours of the fort, and I would recommend taking them, otherwise the entire site might seem somewhat underwhelming for the entrance fee.
5, 8, 5, 7,
and I'll mention this is the only part of the park where you actually have to pay to get in. It's $20, I think. I'll also mention on this point in the trip that this is where I picked up an annual pass for the national park system, which is pretty good if you plan on seeing a lot of the parks in a full year. The area is the same type of pristine beaches and wildlife that you'd find on the other end of the park, but there's a little more inner woodland than the eastern section. interest in the Pensacola area is Gulf Breeze. This is an interior barrier island between Pensacola, the city, and Pensacola Beach, the one that's connecting them both by bridges. Here the bay is murkier, but the island is lusher, and there's more foliage and wildlife in Naval Live Oaks National Preserve, which is also part of Gulf Breeze National Seashore. Snaking around the preserve, and like the rest of the area, it's great for watercraft. I brought a kayak on this trip, so I went for a short paddle around Gulf Breeze, and my paddle broke shortly after. I'd like to believe my gigantic muscles and superhuman strength were to blame, but let's be real, I've kind of been rocking the dad bod here. And that's another point I want to make. I've still got the dad bod, but by this point in the trip, I was kind of getting out of that rut of laziness and inactivity, and going somewhere warm really helped in finding the inspiration and sense of physical consciousness that I kind of need to go in the right direction. Personally, for me, this stop was pretty spectacular, mostly just for the weather. It's not the greatest place on earth, but coming from the northeast winter to the land of bathing suits and flip-flops really changed my mood and demeanor. While I love the snow, deep down I'm really definitely a sun child. As you may or may not be able to see, I got a little sunburn. I couldn't wait to get to the beach, and I didn't put sunscreen on. Quarter Italian, so I always think that I'm not going to get sunburned, but I always do. And yep, kind of hurts, so I had to, I don't know, cover myself a little more than usual. Alright, well that concludes our journey to Florida. Up next, we're going to be heading into Mobile, Alabama, which I probably did in the last episode, so we're actually just going to skip to Mississippi and continue eastward on our cross-country adventure. Alright.